Hello, everyone. I, Sukriti Arora, Assistant Professor, DME Media School, welcome you all to the third edition of Cineast International Film Festival of India, CIFFI 2021. CIFFI 2021 is the world's first 7-day hybrid film festival organized by educational institutes of two countries, DME Media School of Delhi Metropolitan Education, Delhi NCR, India, in association with School of Communications and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. The first edition of CIFFI was held in April 2019, and the second was organized in December 2020. It has been our privilege to be associated with Deakin University during the previous editions of our film festival as well. This time, with the theme of cinematic rejuvenation, #Cinema 2021, CIFFI is being organized in a hybrid mode to serve as a beneficial platform for holding the new methods of viewing and studying cinema during the challenging times of the pandemic. It is a matter of pride for us that CIFFI 2021 has received a submission of 3,130 films from across a total of 111 countries. This film festival is bringing along 21 sessions with 70 experts through 11 panel discussions, 2 curated sessions, 2 master classes, 2 workshops, 2 special sessions, and 2 special segments. Mr. Tigmanshu Dhulia, National Award-winning film director from Bollywood, is the festival ambassador for CIFFI 2021, and we are extremely thankful for his constant support. The festival partners of CIFFI 2021 are Cover Drive Productions, a Noida-based production house; Vigyan Prasar, the organizer of National Science Film Festival of India, International Science Film Festival of India, and India International Science Film Festival; CMS Vatavaran, Environment and Wildlife Film Festival and Forum; Kids Cinema 2020, an online international children's film festival; Cultural Cinema, a concept-based film festival aimed at celebrating world cultures; We Care Film Festival for promoting and exhibiting films on disability; Delhi International Film Festival for screening films amidst heightened deliberations on world cinema. From Australia, we have as partners the Asian Media and Cultural Studies Network and Australia-India Film Practitioners and Researchers Network. Our institutional partners are Global Media Education Council, an international platform of media educators and researchers; Indian Documentary Producers Association, IDPA, an association of documentary filmmakers; Indian Academy of Shorts, an institution for imparting craftsmanship of filmmaking through small capsules; and New Delhi Film Foundation. Our media partners are APN News, a fast-paced current affairs web channel; Hindi Gaurav, one of the oldest Hindi newspapers of Australia; and The Policy Times, an international platform for unfolding policy and governance issues. I would like to inform everyone that CIFFI 2021 is powered by Spark, the Student Council of DME Media School. Journalism@DME is the official newsletter of DME Media School. This fortnightly publication covers all the major activities happening in and out of the campus. It is a student-centric newsletter carried out entirely by them under the supervision of faculty members. DME TV is the official YouTube channel of DME, where you can find the playlist related to all sessions, lecture series, film festivals, and conferences. It gives me immense pleasure to announce that for various sessions, we will go live on our official Facebook channel of DME. For more information, follow us on our social media handles. Links are being shared in the chat box. Today, we will be screening 36 films, and you can watch them all on our website, ciffi.dme.ac.in. Now, I request Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and Festival Director of CIFFI, to kindly give the opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sukriti. So I welcome everybody this afternoon in India. In this session. Today is the 6th day of this 7-day long festival. And on the 6th day, this is the first session, 2 more sessions to go today only. And as Sukriti has already told you all that this festival, we are trying to do many things new. And the first and the foremost thing we should be told to everybody that this is a joint venture of DME, the Media School, Delhi Metropolitan Education, and Deakin University, Australia. And this is the 3rd edition. And right from the 1st edition, this collaboration has happened. And all these 3 years, we have been collaborating at various levels. panels, which also include like if there are 19 sessions comprising panel discussions, workshops, interviews. Among all these sessions, these 7 sessions have come to us with the help of Dr. Vikrant, Kishore, and Deakin University has been instrumental in that. And then as during the last 2 days, Dr. Kishore was instrumental in bringing the entire team of a feature film and a documentary to us, which was completely a new beginning, a new sort of discussions happening, wherein this Australia-India connection was very much dominant. And today's session is again the first of its kind, wherein we will try to explore with the help of the distinguished experts in this session as to at what level India and Australia connection is working as far as the content generation of film production is concerned in Australia, in India. So we'll try to look into all that. So I thank you all again to this session, and I hand it over back to Sukriti.
Thank you so much, sir. We are gathered here today for a panel discussion on the theme Australia-India Film Relations, a Health Check. The session will be chaired by Ms. Julie Marlow, a film professional, writer, and academician. Ms. Marlow has an extensive experience in the arts, culture, and screen industries in Australia and internationally. She worked in senior executive management positions with key government agencies, NGOs, and not-for-profit organizations. Other esteemed members on this panel are Mr. Kartik Mohandas, Mr. A.K. Tareen, Ms. Lath Gupta, and Dr. Vikrant Kishore. I request the chair, Ms. Julie Marlow, to introduce today's panelists to us and begin the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Well, today we're going to, as Mr. Saxena said, explore what's happening between our 2 countries currently, the possibilities for more lasting connections, and more importantly as well, to discuss the state of our respective industries, particularly after 2 years of pandemic. And on a global scale, cinemas have closed, festivals have been cancelled, releases are being held over, box office revenue has been reduced by billions of dollars, and independent filmmakers, crews, day workers are suffering. So are there any upsides at all? And so what we're going to do is talk about those upsides, and what we're doing now is exactly one of those upsides, that we have all learned how to communicate much better online through Zoom, through Teams. We've probably all discovered something important about how our industries are coping. Surprising strengths, the resilience of our industry, and how filmmakers are pivoting to embrace what looks like becoming a new normal for the future. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists and ask them to describe their experiences and what they and their organizations have observed and put into practice during the past 2 years. And for some of us, that means starting brand new organizations and business opportunities. So our first panelist is Lath Gupta. Nina was Chief Executive Officer of the National Film Development Corporation in India for 12 years. And prior to that, a civil servant in the Indian government. And at the NFDC, Nina launched a very important initiative, called Film Bazaar, and various development labs that put Indian cinema on the world map through international collaborations. And she set up the largest film conservation and restoration program in India at the time, and produced and supported several wonderfully acclaimed films internationally, including The Lunchbox. And she worked extensively on government film policy over the years, and she started her own new platform, Cinevesture, and I'll ask Nina shortly to explain what that's about. We also are pleased to have AK Tareen with us, who's one of Australia's most senior experts on India and has been an advisor to the Australian government for nearly 3 decades. And he's established and managed the Austrade network in South India before being appointed South Australian government's inaugural senior trade commissioner to India and South Asia. And he's been recognised with several prestigious awards for his role in developing Australia's bilateral relationship with India across trade, investment, and people-to-people relationships. And he has his own consulting firm, AKT Strategic Consulting, and he's advising countries, governments, and businesses on India, Australia, and the Middle East. And we have Kartik Mohandas, who is going to give us the perspective from the point of view of a film distributor. He's worked in radio and television for over 15 years, collaborating with numerous companies, BBC World Service, CTV, CNBC, NDTV, and so on, with extensive experience in print and web publishing, radio, television, distribution and syndication, and now in film distribution in Australia. And Kartik covers both sides of the fence, having worked in India and Australia in distribution. And then we have Dr. Vikrant Kishore, who is a filmmaker and an academic at Deakin and one of the partners for this event. He's been capturing stories of cultural flows and its impact on the Indian diaspora in Australia. He's written and edited several books on Indian cinema, celebrity culture, and intangible cultural heritage. Has been a jury member on several film festivals, and he's a member of the Regional Advisory Council of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. So that's our esteemed panel for today. I'll just start with my perspective from what Australia, the advantages, I guess, we've had over the last 2 years. We've got relatively low numbers of COVID cases in comparison to the rest of the world. We responded quite quickly with swift lockdowns. We have high vaccination rates. It's approaching 90% double vaccination across the whole country. We have well-formulated COVID-safe policies for film production. And all of those things combined has made us very attractive to offshore productions coming to Australia. So workers continued during the pandemic with big-scale productions coming from mainly America. So that's great for crews, but what about independent producers? How have they been faring? There's been very little support over the past 2 years for smaller scale producers. My colleagues and I have responded by forming the Australia-India Film Council. And I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Kishore, who's going to talk about the aims of the Australia-India Council and his perspective on the last 2 years on filmmaking across 2 countries and what's happening in higher education. So Vikrant, if you want to take over.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, and thanks for the kind introduction. And I would like to also inform you all that this particular panel has been possible, as Julie said, through the efforts of Australia-India Film Council, which has been recently launched. And 3 of us, Julie, Kartik, and me, we all 3 are in the board of Australia-India Film Council. And this particular talk is also part of our series on Australia-India Dosti series, which we'll be continuously doing throughout the year. And this one is the first one within that Dosti series. And before I formally start, I would like to recognize the various traditional lands where we are located and acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. I acknowledge the land, waterways, and airways of the Wurundjeri people and pay our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. I also acknowledge their struggles and acknowledge the struggles of Dalit and indigenous people of India. And to start, I'll just give you a kind of, I'll just go take you through a kind of PowerPoint presentation just to give you an idea what AIFC is all about. So just bear with me for a second. And just to give you a kind of a brief about what our mission is, Australia India Film Councils, is to provide a platform that exclusively promotes Australian culture and financial links with the Indian film industry for the benefit of Australia and Australian screen practitioners, to encourage an equitable growth of Indian and Australian film relations, enriching our film culture to encourage an equitable growth of Indian and Australian film relations. And we are also, in terms of our aims, is to nurture and support Australian film professionals interested in developing and producing Indian themed screen projects, support research into the Indian film sector, promote co-production, distribution, location attractions in Australia and India, and promote screen development grants and investment, and innovative professional development, training, internship, attachments for emerging filmmakers, information exchange through web-based events. And our aim also includes to be a single point of contact for information policy, development and research, to provide accurate and reliable information to the Australian government and film bodies, curate and present a program of Indian cinema for Australian audiences, develop a network of filmmakers, film academics and experts from the Australian and Indian industries, facilitate connections and conversations through a community of practice, which is very important. And finally, encourage diversity and inclusion across all our programs. So I'll just stop that. And just to give you a brief, and I'm not going to take much time because I know we have got so many interesting people out here, and you have already heard about my perspective already in the last 5 different panels. But as I said in one of the earlier panels, and just for the benefit of other panelists who have joined, the esteemed panelists who have joined today, that one of the academics, Lorenzen, asserts that the new Indian diaspora in Australia constitute a very profitable export markets because their purchase powers are much higher than those of Indian home consumers or the old Indian diaspora. Furthermore, Lorenzen argues that Indian diaspora act out of their longing for the homeland through a symbolic act, such as consumption of cultural products. And this kind of cultural production and that kind of the sharing of soft power, or what I can say soft diplomatic power, which India and Australia-India relations have already developed in terms of what we call cinema or Bollywood, food and culture. Those are the things. But has there been anything more done in that area, which we have been talking since early 2000s and till date? Has there been any kind of difference which has been there? So when we see the Australian media or the Australian market, we talk about the keyword these days is multicultural representation. But how much is that multicultural representation reflecting on screen? Do I see, people of color out there? Hardly. Indians, wow. You can give examples, you can count people, in your fingertips. It's like that. So, and what is happening in terms of collaboration? Sadly, after the, even before the COVID started, the production and the co-production and all those things actually got stalled somewhere. And, Julie will talk more in detail about how those things are shaping. But my thing, if I have to look at myself as a film practitioner and as a film teacher, then what is happening in terms of opportunities for international students here? And over the years, since 2010, I've seen now in 2020s, we have a huge cohort of Indian students, or rather South Asian students, coming and wanting to do media courses in Australia. And when they complete the media courses, and there are lots of universities also supporting in terms of internship opportunities or work integrated learning, but at the end of the day, they are still struggling to find that right network, right collaboration. And even many of them who go back to India, they also struggle there again because they are not finding the right connection or right opportunities. And of course, India also works on these kind of informal network of family, friends, friends, family, extended families, and lots of them have been able to, explore and exploit those opportunities. But what happens to people who don't have those kind of connections, both in India and in Australia? And those are the kind of concerns. So most of the times, Australian government has always been concerned about the tourist dollars, as to what Indians are bringing in terms of tourist dollars. And the kind of exchanges that is happening, it is always about, even if Bollywood film comes here in Australia and gets some kind of co-production or production offset, Australian image is always about a kind of a touristic place. You get the best of touristic image. If you want to see Dil Chahta Hai or Hey Baby, it's all those kind of big shots of bird's eye view shots of what Sydney is, what Melbourne is, but never getting into the culture of what the diaspora is going through, or what the actual Australian culture is. So it is still very kind of a touristic, very, very kind of a fetishized kind of an image of a Western country. And there are lots many things to be done, but I think there are other panelists who will give you much more better idea about their co-productions and things like that. So I'll stop and probably hear the other panelists to share their particular perspectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vikrant. I'd like to throw over to Nina, and as well as asking her to tell us about her new venture, which is not very many months old. I'd like her thoughts about what Vikrant's just said about co-production, because I'm sure, as she knows, there was an attempt to probably about, I think it probably kicked off about 2010-ish, Nina, about the possibility of a co-production treaty between Australia and India. And it's quite a big ask, actually, because like Canada, for example, we have lots of soft money. We have heavy government subsidy for a small industry. We have very, very small audiences for our homegrown films in comparison to India's very large audiences, except India does not have a well-instituted program of support for independent cinema. And Nina did a great deal of work in that regard with the Film Bazaar. So can I go over to you now, Nina, and ask your thoughts on those subjects? And also, anyone who reads Scroll India, the magazine, there was a really good article last week, at the end of last week, about the achievements of Film Bazaar and what Nina has been doing over the past few years. And I well recommend people who are interested to read that piece, because it gives a very, very succinct overview of that particular initiative. So over to you, Nina.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Vikrant, for putting this together. I also thank the Deakin University and the DME Delhi for holding this panel, and congratulations for doing a film festival for students. I think we could have many more of them in India. So this is really a very, very welcome step, and I congratulate you for it. Well, Julie and I have a very old association. I think we first met in 2007, and we built this association over the years. In 2007, as the CEO of NFDC, we set up Film Bazaar, which was a film market that was set up for the first time in South Asia. Film Bazaar, of course, went through its teething troubles, but went on to become fairly successful, I would like to say, in terms of putting Indian cinema on the map. Julie and her colleagues from Australia were a great support system. They used to come every year with a delegation of Australian producers who were looking at co-producing films. I think a lot of water has flown under the bridge since then. And before I speak about the work that I'm going to do, Julie, with your permission, I'm going to sort of just give a macro perspective on what is happening in the world in the field of entertainment before I speak about Cinevestor, which is my new venture. You know, I think 15 years ago, we were talking largely film. There was a very clear delineation between film and television. There were two separate industries, and one industry did not really know what was happening in the other. Your cast, your crew, your producers, the financing all came from two separate parallel streams, and there was very little connection in terms of production between the two. Things have changed now with platforms and SVOD platforms coming in, and now suddenly there's a merger of high-end television with feature films, and we're all watching them on the same platform. We have what we call web series now on what in India are known as OTT platforms. OTT actually only means over the top, which was considered an ancillary source of income, but has willy-nilly ended up actually becoming a primary source of revenue for the entertainment business. I look at development from various perspectives and not just film production. I think film production is a very small part, the intrinsic, of course, the spine, the central part of the film business, but it is only one component of the film business. And there are many aspects of the film business prior to making a film and subsequent to making a film. And if I were to put it in a sort of a sequential manner, I would say it begins with research and development, something that I believe we tend to falter on when it comes to making films. There is, of course, pre-production and understanding really how projects are set up. Education, which is so important. You don't see too much film education. We are not seeing global best practices becoming a part of India at the pace that I personally would like to see happen. Of course, this film production, and then that is followed by distribution, exhibition, and extremely important, as Julie pointed out, building audiences. Because if you don't have people who want to see the kind of movies you're putting out there, then really why are we making those movies? Underlying all of this is the fact, and I cannot emphasize that enough, is that unlike other cultural and performing, other cultural arts, film is a serious business which involves a lot of money, It's not like picking up a canvas and buying a paint box and putting something together in your studio and putting it out there in the market. It's not like writing a book where you can sit at your computer and type out hundreds of pages and put a book out. It actually is not only financially a very challenging proposition, but every filmmaker has to keep in mind the fact that when he makes a film, he is also effectively in charge of the careers of a large crew and cast whose future career prospects, professional prospects really depend upon the success of a film. And therefore, for anybody who's aspiring to be a filmmaker, who's aspiring to be a film producer, I think it's very important for him to simultaneously wear a business hat and not merely a creative hat, and keep in mind that there is a creative responsibility, a responsibility of fine-tuning and upscaling your craft, but at the same time, you're responsible as the project head for the careers of many, many people who are associated with that particular film. The second point that I cannot again emphasize enough is the fact that there are no second chances. This is not like the car industry where you make a car, or the phone industry where you make a phone, you find there's a flaw in it and you can recall. There are no recalls in this business. You put a film out there, you can't say, hey, sorry guys, I think I made a mistake in editing. Let me put it back out of the theaters and off the platforms and tweak it a bit and put it out. There are no second takes in this business. And it's very important that we keep these critical parameters in mind when we venture into the film business. For me personally, I've been associated at a policy and at a production on a ground level with the film business for more than 20 years now. And I have, and my views have changed over the years, and I believe that it's very important for us to increasingly blur the lines between what we call parallel or art house cinema and what we call commercial cinema. Every film is commercial cinema. Every film has to have a business aspect. And I cannot emphasize again that enough, that it's very important for each one of us to look on it as a business. We talk about the film business and then we say we're making an art film or we're making parallel cinema, and that just doesn't go very well. Particularly in a country like India, where unlike in countries like Australia or in Europe, where there is a lot of state support and state subsidies, in India, that is not the case. I firmly ascribe to the view that it's very important that we recognize the fact that development cannot be in perpetuity, and therefore we must focus on fine-tuning our craft. To come to the present scenario, having said all of this, somewhat bluntly, I'm sorry, please forgive me, but I believe it's important to put facts out there as they should be. I think audiences are undergoing a huge change, and I want to pick up on a point that Vikrant just said. Vikrant made 2 points that I thought were very interesting, and I'm going to pick up the latter of the two first. He said attraction to Australia, for instance, for Indian filmmakers still tends to be rather touristic. It's a touristic experience that you want to show Indian audiences. You know, a song, for instance, being shot in Australia, or the sort of, we want to show them a dream world, and that has typically been the case. I do see a slight change happening, and I want to point out what those two changes are. Number one, that audiences are changing thanks to the platforms, and really all credit to them for this. Our perspective on the kind of movies and the kind of entertainment we want to do is no longer confined to indigenous content. It may at the moment be only 2% of our audiences who are watching global content, but I believe it will change, and it's going to change at a very rapid pace. After all, if you're watching Spider-Man that is dubbed in multiple Indian languages, there is no reason for us to not find a film from Australia equally enticing, or a film from everywhere, from any other country, equally enticing to watch if it's a story that we identify with as an audience. So I think the entire audience game is now changing, and the front end of the distribution business is undergoing a phenomenal change. And you know what they say, the change comes slowly and then suddenly. And one fine day, we would find ourselves actually watching far more films from other countries than we are doing at the moment. Given that change, I find it somewhat bemusing, if I may say, use the word, that while the front end of our business is undergoing this change, where we're watching films from each other's countries, the back end of the production business and of the film business continues to be very insulated and confined to our boundaries. So even when we make a film, we tend to work with crew from a particular country. We are working with, if you're making an Indian film, we go with our Indian crew. We work with our Indian crew. There is no, there's very little cross-border engagement happening on the back end of the film and the entertainment business. It's happening at the HOD level. We want a DOP who would come in and bring different perspective in the way he views a film. And some of that has been happening for a while now, for a very long time. But really, in terms of an organic process where there is an interchange of crew across the country, that's not really happening. Definitely not happening between countries like India or South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world. I know it happens in Europe because it's a credit system. You need money from different countries, and therefore it's imperative that you bring crew on from different countries to be able to avail of those subsidies. But again, that is not an organic process that happens because the subsidy structure has been made in that manner, that you need credit points from every country. To make it simpler for the students, for film students who come back, I think it's important that we are able to make ourselves available for work in different countries. And I don't see why, if there is a shortage of crew in India, for instance, and it is conservatively estimated that where the demand for crew is 100, the supply of crew in many segments of the film production business is about 80. That's a huge disparity between demand and supply. Why cannot crew come in from other countries and work? Likewise, if there is somebody who's making an independent film in Australia, for instance, or in New Zealand, or in the USA, and is looking for crew from other countries, why would he not be able to avail of crew from India or South Asia or Southeast Asia? So I think the cross-cultural interaction that we're talking about can happen at two levels. One, of course, is producing and co-producing films, building audiences, releasing our films in each other's countries. But also the back end, which I think is very critical. And I personally believe that the back end, if that interface were to be established in the back end, it would make a huge difference going forward to the front end as well. Because we all start emulating best practices from each other's countries. Maybe India would be able to teach how to actually make films in lower cost, how to find solutions that are very often, a leading line producer in India who works with Hollywood productions that come to India to shoot. He says people love to shoot here because we find simple solutions over here, and we shoot really fast, and we're able to cut this thing. People who go to Australia to shoot, and I remember I just recently watched an interview of Leonardo DiCaprio, and he was saying it's such a joy to shoot in Australia. He says they are so professional, they're so good at their work, and they are so hungry to work. And it was actually really interesting to hear his feedback. And so every country brings its own strength, and imagine how much more powerful this sector could be, across the global sector could be, if we all learned to share each other's strengths with each other. The second point that you made, Vikrant, was about students being unable to find opportunities in India. And I'm really glad you raised that issue. It's something that's troubled me for many, many years when I was in NFDC, and it continues to now. And it was this, the lack of being able to connect. You know, it's a very small business. It's a very it's a closed business, and people like to work with people they know. They do not want to work with strangers. They like to get to know each other. And more than in any other industry, this industry is driven by relationships. You can have a master's degree in filmmaking, but really, if nobody knows your work, if nobody knows your body of work, people don't know you, it's not going to get you anywhere. There are no hierarchies based on educational qualifications in this business, unlike in a lot of other sectors. And therefore, relationships are critical, paramount, and central to building a career in this industry. And this is where we come to CIFFI. I have set up CIFFI with the objective of identifying certain white slate areas in the industry. And I hope people will avail of these opportunities. One, of course, has been to provide more and more development opportunities, not just for your content, but also in terms of training and upgrading your craft and your skills as film professionals. But more important, a platform where people can build relationships with each other, and where they have an opportunity to put their talent out for other people to see. At the moment, we've only launched one vertical on a very temporary website. So I request you all to not judge me by the website that we have launched. The platform is underway, and we hope to launch it and have it fully functional by March 2022. Thank you. I'm sorry I spoke for quite a bit. Thank you.
That's great, Nina. Thank you. I might come back to a couple of your points there when it comes to question time, but I'd like to move on at the moment to Mr. Tareen and talk a little bit about the state of relations between India and Australia generally, from a broader perspective that involves trade and lasting collaborations, and how we can, what strategies we can use to foster those sorts of relationships in the creative industries, bearing in mind that our practices are slightly different, and our labour, certainly as Nina was talking about, our labour is on both sides very experienced, but there's no cross-pollination. Certainly from our point of view, that's because largely we have very strong union protected, if you like, rates of pay and ability to bring crew in that aren't heads of department. So that would be a task, that would be something that perhaps we can start talking about with our union here, about loosening the barriers a little bit. But if I can throw now to Mr. Tareen just to talk about collaboration at a higher level that can be used by our business to foster lasting relationships.
Sorry, unmute. Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. And let me begin by congratulating you and our team for putting together this very useful program today. Let me begin by stating the relationship between Australia and India at a much broader level. My relationship goes back to nearly 30 years. I started in 95. So yeah, it's a long relationship. But I think I can tell you very safely that Australia and India have never had it this good. They're on a very, very strong footing, be it at the political level, where both our prime ministers share a very cordial relationship at a personal level, be it at the bureaucratic or government level, at the business level, or even at the people-to-people level. Like you mentioned earlier, there are over 700,000 Indian diaspora living in Australia. So they form the backbone of the strength, and that gives a huge hope for developing much closer relationship between Australia and India across various levels. The Australian government has Australia and India have enhanced the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which is a very high level of relationship. And the Australian government has recently announced its fifth consulate in Bangalore, apart from the ones already existing in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. Austrade has a very large network of offices. I think, if I remember correctly, the second largest in the world, or perhaps it could be one of the first. And they run a very successful program called Australia Inter-Business Exchange to bring businesses closer, bring new technologies, introduce new products and services. And the two-way trade between Australia and India in 2020 was close to 25 billion Australian dollars. And I'm pleased to highlight that education forms Australia's biggest export, with close to $6 billion worth of exports. And I think there are more than 100,000 Indian students studying in Australia as we speak. And obviously, the last couple of years have been tough, but I don't see any reason as Australia reopens, Indians come back in much larger numbers to study in our universities in Australia. Going back to, of course, today's topic is more about film. So let me talk a bit about my sort of role in this particular field. When I started with the government of Australia, setting up the Austrade offices in South India in 1995, the awareness level of Australia in India was obviously very low. People in India would basically relate Australia to cricket, koalas, and kangaroos. And so we needed to do something to build awareness, because awareness meant everything for us to grow our trade, to grow our tourism, to grow our education, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that was also the time the Indian film industry was beginning to go overseas to shoot, popular destinations being Switzerland, Maldives, Mauritius, Singapore, UK, and so on and so forth. So I think around that time, the first Indian film to shoot in Australia that I can recollect is the Kamal Haasan starrer Indian, which was produced by my good friend A.M. Ratnam, and A.R. Rahman scored the music. And that became a pretty big hit. And that sort of opened the floodgates for a number of films from Bollywood and Tollywood and Collywood. And I'm sure you know what these terminologies mean. And I live in Chennai, which where the film industry is almost as big, if not bigger than Bollywood, where some really good content gets made here. And that was a time they were looking to go overseas, and Australia sort of was a novel country for them to showcase something new that the Indian audience hadn't seen before. And over a period of time, when sort of this sort of more and more people started going, we at the government level thought we need to do something to enhance the level of engagement. So rather than just using Australia for its locales, we thought we should also showcase our services, like another Kamal Haasan star called Abhay did special effects, like all the cutting edge technologies from Iceland. We showcase some of our 3D cameras, the stunt director. So we started introducing more of our capability to Indian filmmakers. And as you rightly said, we have a very structured and very sort of mature film industry with very clear rules about labor laws and rules and permissions, which I think made very easy for Indian producers to go and plan their itineraries, plan their shooting schedules accordingly. Unfortunately, also we had some very good names like Anupam Sharma, who I think has done probably more than half of the film industry shot in Australia. So then we decided to take it to the next level, which again, we tied up with Ad Labs. When I was a senior trade commissioner for South Australia, we co-produced a film called Love Story 2050. The film wasn't a huge success. In fact, it was a bit of a disaster. But what it took us to the next level in terms of offering subsidies and incentives. For every dollar you spend in South Australia, we would reimburse, a certain percentage of that expenditure. So that sort of brought into limelight some of the less known areas of Australia, the Kangaroo Islands, the Flinders Ranges, and they were shown by their actual name in the film. So that sort of opened the floodgates for tourists, because Indians love to visit places where their favorite heroines dance or sing, and they want to go visit those places. And fortunately, again, there was a time Indian middle class was, really sort of expanding, and people looking for new locations, new tourist spots, and Australia really sort of caught on with that. The next level, obviously, which is happening now, is more and more collaborative productions between Australia and India. We've already seen a few, and I know a few are in the pipeline. And the last couple of years, as you rightly said, Julie, have been a bit of a tough time for everyone, including the film industry and including tourism and travel. And now with Australia reopening, and I think with students and tourists being allowed shortly, if not already, I think 15th December, I think we should get back to a normalcy. And again, I would be very keen for us to explore how we can take it to the next level of engagement between the Indian film industry and our film industry. I think that's where seminars like your one hosting today and the universities have always led Australia's engagement with India from the front. Even before trade came, I think Australian universities have done a fantastic job in terms of marketing Australia to India. And when students go, the parents go to visit them. Obviously, they're business people. They look for business opportunities. So tourism grows, business grows. I think education will continue to be a strong pillar on which Australia-India relationship will be built, apart from, of course, our growing diaspora in Australia, which reconnects back with the Indian roots and that brings in a great level of familiarity. I think when compared to US, probably we are a generation behind, but it's a matter of time before the Indians start playing much larger senior roles in Australia as the Indians sort of, make Australia their home. I think with that, I'll stop, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tareen, thank you. There are practical things we can do as well, I think, following on from what you've just said. One of the things that, is always brought up by foreign crews going to India is that the location permits and rules are not standardized. So you can go to Bangalore and you'll get one set of rules, you go to Delhi and then there'll be another set. And it will be, I know that there was a bit of talk during Nina's time at the NFDC about, is it possible? And because you've got such a wide section of practitioners and different languages and interests, and the whole thing is quite fragmented in a way. So to impose a standardization might be a step too far, but it certainly would oil the wheels a little bit, for Australians to come to India. But there have been a few very successful Australian engagements with Indian filmmakers and shooting in India, and it is absolutely getting better. And at any one time, of course, there is an immense amount of documentary activity going on in both our countries that perhaps we aren't aware of. I know that in our Northern Territory, which really from where I sit here in Melbourne, which is a very European climate and city, in the Northern Territory in Darwin, it's tropical. It's like a different country and different rules apply, so standardization can be an issue. But with that, I'll move on to Kartik, because last but very much not least, Kartik, you know, I would love your perspective on film distribution during the last 2 years. I think it's safe to say that the only winners over this period have been the streaming services. There are, I think, upsides to that in terms of exposing new audiences to different kind of contents. And there's a interesting question in the chat from one of the students about the streaming services giving us different kind of content from all over the world. Is that the reason of the changing mindset of audiences, particularly in India, that they're actually wanting something new and different? So if we could go over to you now, Kartik, and talk about your perspective from distribution over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to the esteemed panel who are there and present for this webinar. I'll start by saying that the cinema industry, and especially distribution, has been suffering the effects of COVID. Just like the human body itself, cinema distribution has been absolutely hammered over the last 2 years. I think anyone who had been following the AMC stock in the US would have seen, and Cineworld stock of how it fell. So that was the doldrums and the depths to which, the industry actually fell to during COVID times. A lot of people talk about the fact that streaming services have taken off, which they have. Yes, absolutely. But having said that, cinema has proved one very important thing. Any big blockbuster that was produced needs cinema as a source of revenue and as a channel of distribution in order to make good, to recoup its production money, and also the ROI that the producers deem fit. Case in point being James Bond. Why did they hold off for so long, despite having been offered just in upwards of $400 million by Netflix? I think the price that they wanted was $685. They wouldn't budge. And it's not like they're producing, unlike Marvel, it's not like, MGM and the Broccolis are producing a film every year, to be able to say, hey, you know what, we'll make up for this in the next 3 or 4 that come out. Having said that, Indian films as well, there are many. 2 of them which we are going to see. One we have already seen this year, Suryavanshi and 83. Big budget films which have been held back because unless and until you don't get cinema distribution, even in international markets, you're not going to be able to recoup its money. As far as Indian products in international markets, specifically Australia and New Zealand is concerned, they have come of age. I think $1 million plus of gross box office revenue is something that we expect from a good and from a big film now. I think the marks that we're looking to breach is the 3 million mark and the 5 million mark. Bahubali crossed the 5 million mark. So Dangal easily crossed the 3 million mark. We're now looking for movies that will, push above and beyond that. I see a lot of other French films, Portuguese films, Italian films that are being released, but they squeeze out somewhere on average between 100 to about $250,000. And of course, the big ones make the big bucks. But on an average, a Punjabi film will easily score anywhere between 100 to $250,000 today. That's the mid-tier films. So content has come a long way. It still needs cinema. But having said that, it's actually reshaped the dynamics of the money and the revenue associated with different kinds of stories being told. In today's day and age, I really don't make distinctions between cinema apart from being channels of distribution, OTT, cinema, or short form web content. Everything is a story. Everything is content. It's just that how do you want to slice it, dice it, and monetize it? So anyway, I'll keep an IP on that. Slice, dice, and monetize. And that's exactly what producers need to be looking at. Even before you embark on a film, it'll be great to talk to some distributors to figure out what the trends are and what are some of the do's and don'ts. Another example of a movie that's been released, which we released recently, very close to my heart, was Chandigarh Kare Aashiki. It's about a gym junkie who's extremely macho but falls in love with a transgender person. and then has a complete meltdown in his brain, when he finds out that the person that he's in love with and has intimate relationships is a transgender person. Now, a film like that was very fresh, and fresh films actually would gross in excess of 300K in Australia. I'm talking all gross box office figures, by the way. But this one has really not hit the mark. A lot of other films which have been coming also have not been hitting the mark, apart from the big ones. And the key reason for that is there's just too much inventory. There's too much content. And I think we can see that right across the board. I bet 8 out of 10 people out here spend more time going through trailers on Netflix than actually watching the content itself. It takes much more for us to get to what we really want to engage with. So short time spans, attention deficiency, too much of content out there, and even the production levels and the competition has really gone up. So you need to produce a product that is well produced, which requires funding in order to compete with all the other products out there. So in a market that demands better quality, has more competition, I really think producers have got the short end of the stick, and they do need help from bodies, industry, and government in order to promote them. As far as distribution is concerned, I think even people who just were adequately working on cinema distribution need to follow hybrid models. And people who are just producing short form content need to explore how they could also eventually evolve into long form content. And that's where the conundrum lies. We are in the middle of this great transition, where 60% of the transition has already happened. But having said that, there's more to come. What I mean by that is we've got so many OTT platforms now: Netflix, Amazon, Stan, Paramount Plus, Disney, Star, and there's more to come. Lionsgate is coming out. Any production company with enough content is going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put a streaming content out there. So we'll see all this drama being played out once again on the OTT space. But having said that, I think cinema, it'll be very interesting to see. I definitely don't think it'll be making as much as it did in 2019 and from 2022 onwards. They'll get these little peaks. But I think the OTT players have scooped out a huge chunk of revenue from this. But the interesting fact is, how do we able to access these two parallel streams of revenue? So you've got OTT, which has multitude of content, can experiment with all the content it does, but has the steady cash flow behind it of 171 million plus consumers, who are allowing a direct debit of an average of $14 per month. So that's huge cash flow. On the other hand, cinema is huge cash flow, but unlike something that's steady, like a heartbeat, you'll have massive excesses and then absolutely empty troughs, when nothing's going to happen. You're going to have movies that are going to just completely bomb out. And then, of course, as rents keep increasing, cinema operators have got higher rents to contend with. Secondly, people sitting in the comfort of their home, they can order Uber, etc., whatever they want. But, the cinema experience hasn't changed that much. We still have our popcorn and ready-to-eat snacks, and you got gold class, so on and so forth. People have experimented with 4DX, which hasn't really worked. 3D also hasn't really taken off. So there's a lot to contend with. Cinema is under challenge, but I do believe in grand silver linings, however thin they might be. I think good stories will find the money that they're after, the audiences that they're after, and that should be the focus point. And if we don't want a one-stop McDonald's or a Disney shop, and a drive-through from there for entertainment, I think government and bodies need to support diversity in filmmaking. I think that's very important.
I agree, Kartik. I think diversity is very important. And I also, the streamers are starting to give back. They are starting to buy local content in both our countries. They've set up offices in both our countries, and they're actively looking. But I agree with you that cinema, I don't think that, you know, people are sort of predicting the death of cinema, you know, and it happens every 10 years or so, the death of cinema, but it won't. I think people love that collective experience, and there's nothing like it, you know. What I do think for the students out there, though, is the onus is on you to make the best content you possibly can. And that actually includes doing quite a bit of work and research on the state of play in the industry. Who's who, who's buying, what are they looking for? Look at people's output and say, okay, you know, try and form a view, and then develop. Do not let your work out until it's the best it can be for you. Because as Nina said, you don't get a second chance. You just have to make it the best you can. And the key to that is development, development, development. I think Nina was right when she was saying about how audiences have changed over the years. There's no doubt that audiences have got more sophisticated over the years, and that's partly due to the mass consumption of different types of content that people are being exposed to, and the sophistication these days of high-end television.
True.
I mean, you know, just only a few years ago, you know, there would be no way that we in Australia could watch a series like Delhi Crime, for example. And now we can, you know, and it's powerful, it's beautifully produced, you know, it's all of those things that make riveting content. And to be able to do that, you know, you as filmmakers have to know what makes that a good program. You know, who's your audience? You've got to ask yourselves right from the word go, who's going to watch this? You know, you can't be all things to all people. You have a point of view, you develop your own aesthetic and do it to the best of your ability. And then, I mean, good films find their level, they find their way into the marketplace. Would you agree with that, Nina?
Yes, absolutely. I think what is critical to a good film is not the story. Every story is interesting, but your ability to tell a story, your ability to fine-tune your craft to the extent that it engages with the audience. And we oftentimes lose sight of that. We tend to think it's the story, but it's actually the craft.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Vikrant, would you've been monitoring questions. I think we're going to question time now. We've got 20 minutes left, and I'd just like to thank everyone on my panel for being so open and interesting in what they have to say. It's been a wide-ranging discussion. So I think we'll throw open Vikrant now, if we can.
Yeah, so there are quite a few questions, and there's this first question which rightly comes to both Kartik and Nina, you know, and the question is from Khushi Srivastava, and she asked, as OTTs are giving us different kind of contents from almost all over the globe, do you think this is the reason of changing mindset of audience, that they want something different, something new? In a way, partially you have responded to that.
Yeah.
So
I guess
Nina,
they're talking about, that question is more about the increasing sophistication of the audience, you know, demanding better experiences, I guess.
I think it's, may I? Kartik?
Yeah.
Nina ji, please, after you.
I think OTTs have, if I were to really, OTTs have played this phenomenal role in actually democratizing the film viewing experience for people, not just in terms of the number of people who are watching it. And that is very critical in India, where you have 600 million people who have access to smartphones and the internet. And those people did not have access to theaters, movie, cinema halls. Only 2%, the total number of ticketing sales in a year adds up to 2% of India's population. And that is not to say that 2% of India's population watches the films. Those are the number of admissions. And actually the number is much less. Suddenly you have an entire world of entertainment that has opened up to people who didn't have access to it all these years. So I think for me personally, I think that's extremely, from an Indian perspective, that's very, very remarkable. That's a huge achievement. Number two, of course, the fact that storytelling has become so diverse. And, you know, we used to have this one-dimensional view of countries about 30 years, or even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, right? You would watch, as as Vikrant said, that you went to Sydney for a particular purpose to shoot, or you went to Switzerland to see the Alps. You're actually getting to know more about different cultures. Australia is no longer just about kangaroos and ostriches. England is no longer just about the Queen. India is no longer about Indian curry and palaces and Maharajas. So I think all of us are building these new narratives and new impressions and perceptions of different countries, and our curiosity is driving us to see more and more of content. So really hats off to the platforms for that, because I don't think any other distribution format, and we have to remember that platforms are a format of exhibition. They're a means to exhibit, just as the movie hall is, or the DVD or the Blu-ray story. All of them are formats of showing content. But platforms have definitely played a huge role over there. There's no denying that.
Yeah. Kartik.
Totally agree. I think the revolution that has come about is because of a single word called accessibility that they've given, you know, the huge audience. Example of that is Squid Games. I mean, I didn't know which series is going to topple Bridgerton as the #1 series in Australia. And for all you know, it had to be Squid Games, a Korean dark drama, you know, and it just blew my mind of how a content that was produced in Korea out of left field just took over. And to me, that's once again content, you know, good content finding its audience and then rising to the top. It will happen. So somewhere there is this purity of production or of conception that you might have. But at the same time, I think it's also very important to analyze also. Filmmaking is a collaborative process. Just don't collaborate with the camera person and the sound person. Talk to distributors, talk to other players in the market, talk to your peers. It's very important because we want students to survive. We want them to continue to make good films. If they don't make it through the first 5, 6, 8 years of their filmmaking career, you know, it's very easy for them to get depressed and dejected as well. So all about collaboration, watch much more. And it's very true. OTT players have exposed us to much more and also have given us an opportunity to showcase a diversity of products.
Definitely. Vikrant, are there any more questions?
There are two interrelated questions. So the first one, I would say, and then this Nina and I also picked up in my kind of opening remarks. So do you think relationships are more important in any industry, be it Hollywood or Bollywood, than talent of person? And the other one is, does Australia or any other countries also have nepotism in film industry like India? And both questions are from two different Kushis. One is Kushi Sharma, another is Kushi Srivastava.
Clearly a happy day. The Kushis are riding the wave. I'm sorry. Kushi means happiness in India, Julie, in Hindi.
Oh, okay. Okay. Look, on the subject of nepotism, no, not really, you know, in Australia. I think there's a difference between nepotism and finding your tribe. You know, you find the people you like and you want to work with and you're simpatico with and you have a shorthand, and, you know, that comes from years of collaboration and networking and knowledge and you know, just finding your collaborators. And that's a very different story to being given opportunities without necessarily earning them. And really in Australia, we have so many safeguards against that sort of thing that it's actually incredibly difficult, because our government departments are incredibly transparent and, you know, have strict rules about, for example, board members profiting from available funds and things like that. So no, I would say not really, although because we're a very small industry, levels of accusations of nepotism do come up from time to time, but that's because it's quite a small pool that get commissioned, particularly for television. But, you know, television, it's a business. It's not a kind of a democratic organization, homogenous organization. Television, they're in the television business. They're not in the risk business. They want to know that people can deliver what they said they're going to deliver, and they deliver it on time, on budget, satisfy the advertisers and draw in an audience. And that's what television does these days. I mean, public broadcasters here, there are two, and they're slightly different, and they can afford to take more risks. But again, they have their own demographics and their own audiences that they're constantly servicing. So I guess on balance, no, there isn't that much nepotism.
Right. So there's one last question there from Pramod Kumar Pandey. And the question is, since the film distribution is badly affected, are there any alternatives being thought of apart from OTT? Can the cinema and theater survive?
And who is this question from, Vikrant?
From Pramod Kumar Pandey. He is one of the assistant professors at DMA.
Sure. Pramodji, a very insightful question. And this was a question that I asked 3.5 years back with a major cinema chain. And we presented some solutions as well. I'll briefly go into some history, and then I'll tell you what you can expect and why I think the train has left the station. So cinemas were behemoths. You know, they're these giants sitting out there on Mount Everest. And I mean, no amount of wind, rain, sun can actually move them. The 90-day exclusion time period was cast in stone and steel and reinforced by gunpowder. It was that strong. You know, they just said, this is never going to happen. And the proposition was, we could see Netflix is coming on board, Amazon is coming on board. We as cinema distributors were happy to offer the product also for online distribution to patrons of the cinema, possibly for a fee, who had already watched the film. So some sort of a subsidized ticket that once you come to the cinema and you watch it, you know, minimum of 4 people, it gives you a golden ticket that, you know, across the next week, if you wanted to watch it at home, you can use that pass, so be it. However, all these hybrid models that we were discussing, nothing went through. Obviously, cinemas have their, just like what Julie was saying, you know, they're in the, you have to understand, cinema owners are landlords. They're not people who love movies. Yes, they love movies. They like to watch it with their families, but they are landlords. Or you can call them, they're airline operators. Every seat that goes empty on every hour is loss of revenue for them. All the main cardinal points that they're interested in is fillage. How many seats are they filling every session, every hour? And also, what is the total rent accruing and how much repairs are being conducted on upgrade, capital degradation, so on and so forth. So the point is, do we see any hybrid model? No. I think for people who have been reading about the industry, Amazon has been buying cinema chains. Netflix also has been buying cinema chains. Netflix started a little earlier because of it. Sorry, Julie was about to say something, I think.
No, sorry.
No,
I wasn't.
all good. Yeah, so Netflix actually, because of the fact they couldn't get their movies to be screened or be accommodated for major film festivals, had to release in cinema. That was the start of it. A film like Roma, they wanted to enter in the Oscars, also at the Cannes Film Festival, but they couldn't because it did not have cinema distribution or release. So they crossed that bridge. But however, when you have 170 million plus subscribers and about $2 billion flowing into your pockets every month, you just go and buy yourself a cinema chain. You don't need to worry about all these things. And that's exactly what's happening. Tech companies are now the people with the money controlling the flow and deciding how much they'll pay for content. So it's very important to notice that tech companies, and they'll continue to innovate in that space. I see innovation coming from cinema in terms of the experience that they can give, and it's not going to happen on a technological basis. This is, I mean, partially yes, but it's not going to be your 4DX or your 3D. No, those technologies, it's going to be a very different kind of experience that cinemas have to give out. And secondly, tech companies, they seem to be wanting to innovate more on the side where they give you a metaverse experience of content. That's a frontier. That's a wild west right now of content that's really taking place. For people who are into sandbox, Decentraland, they would know what I'm talking about. There's some major movements happening in that space. So that's where the innovation will happen. That's where the change will happen. That's what I feel. And as far as cinemas or some sort of a hybrid model is concerned, no, I don't think so. I think cinemas will continue to exist because at home, you've got your phone, you've got the wife, you've got kids, you've got your partner. There's a lot of other tugs. But when you want deep engagement with content, you want a quiet room where larger than life characters and canvas where you can lose yourself.
May I add to that, Julie, if you don't mind?
Please.
Okay.
Sorry, please do. I was
thank you. I believe that from an Indian perspective, I think that the exhibition story in India is yet to happen. It hasn't really happened. And I'll tell you why. Of course, we had theaters, and we've seen a lot of theaters shut down. 10 years ago, we had about 14,000 screens in the country. Today, we have 6,000 screens. And a very fundamental reason for that has been the lack of price sensitivity. Tickets in India tend to be so expensive. Tend to be located in places where low-income groups would hesitate to enter, let's say, high-end malls, where cinema theaters chains are typically located. They would hesitate to go there because they do not shop there, and therefore they believe this is a place that may not be in keeping with their economic standards. So they tend not to enter these places. And there is a social hesitation of entering places like this. So a lot of people, even lower income group and very low income group, people who can actually afford, who will go for what are called melas, country fairs in India, and spend 1,000 rupees, even if their monthly income is just 10 to 15,000 rupees, would hesitate to go to a cinema hall and pay 100 rupees for a ticket. Number one is that. Number two, now with 600 million people in this country having access to entertainment for the first time in their lives on their phones, entertainment suddenly becomes very exciting and very enticing. You now want to see the big screen experience. I find myself, who's been watching films in theaters, on phones, on my laptop for years and years, wanting to actually watch every new release in theaters far more than I did 3 years ago, because I think they're all worn out with watching films. But for people who've never been to a cinema hall, I think the prospect of going to cinemas is going to be very important. The success of theaters in India will lie in the fact that you're able to address the exhibition sector in the tier B and C towns and cities and provide more and more cinema halls at price-sensitive rates, at lower rates. And I think that we could yet have a new story to tell where the exhibition network is concerned in India.
Okay,
Specifically to India. Yeah.
Have you lost a lot of single-screen cinemas
over
yes. the last 2 years?
Virtually all of them, practically.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not in the last 2 years, in the last 2 decades.
Just over time.
Yeah.
Julie, so it's time to wrap up, I think.
I think Kartik sir is saying something and he was on mute. I think he was saying something.
Sorry, yes, I'm on mute. Thank you for that, for reminding me. But Nina makes such an interesting point, and I just wanted to, I'll be very brief. Markets are all different. I'll give an example. China, when they say we're having a big release, in Australia, when I say I'm having a big release, it's like, okay, 200 cinemas, 236, going up to 400 maybe for a biggie. When I say I want to have a big release in China, I'm looking at minimum 35,000 theaters and prints. That's the kind of scale we're looking at. So India has a lot of catching up to do, absolutely. And that's where every market is so uniquely different. And that's what we need to understand. None of them are going to follow the same trajectory. In Australia, the proliferation of smart TVs, technology, high-speed broadband internet right to your home, affords and makes it easy for you to be able to watch content in the ease of your home with a 5.1 surround system. However, in other countries, I'll give another gem, that's ready for the taking is a country like Burma. Saudi Arabia has just started opening theaters from last year in their country. So cinema globally has vast grounds to cover in different regions. And all those regions will follow their own trajectory, which is very fascinating. So yes, I mean, definitely not the death of cinema. It's just going to change in different places.
Yeah. Thank you, Kartik. There's a lot to look forward to. Very, very interesting discussion. And thank you to my panel. And thank you to all the partners and organizations who put this wonderful session together. It's been really, really useful, I'm sure. And for all you students out there, you are the future. You're the content makers of the future. And, you do the best you can and be the best you can be, and hopefully you can break through into either of our industries, actually, in Australia or India, and we would welcome you. So thank you very much to everyone, and good night from me.
Thank you. This was delightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
This was a very interesting session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Chief Associate Director of CIFFI, to please give the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Sukriti. Thank you, Dr. Vikrant Kishore, for ideating this session for exploring and analyzing the film relationship between India and Australia. This session was brought to us to CIFFI 2021 by Australia-India Film Council. I'm thankful to Ms. Julie for chairing this session and enlightening us all on emerging area of Australia-India cooperation in filmmaking. She posed many focused questions and tried to bring answers to us with the help of esteemed panelists. Thanks to Ms. Nina, who as CEO of NFDC brought radical reforms in film production and film marketing. We all are aware how she introduced Film Bazaar to bring filmmakers and film financiers and film producers to one platform and benefit. She supported the concept of co-production between countries, which will also strengthen cross-cultural relations. Mr. A.K. Tareen talked about various dimensions of Australia-India relations while keeping his focus on films. He referred to collaboration between Australia and India while telling us about Indian films being shot in Australia. Mr. Kartik provided interesting insight into film distribution. He talked about the influx of content and the short attention of viewers. He also provided a comparison between mainstream film production and the OTT content in terms of finances. Thanks to all panelists and thanks to Dr. Vikrant Kishore and everyone present here. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bala, for the concluding remarks. I would now like to extend a very special thanks to all the panelists here for joining us today and for this wonderful and enlightening session that you have held. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Kishore, for organizing this session. I would like to extend my immense gratitude to the management of DME. Without the support of Mr. Aman Sahani, Vice Chairman, Honorable Justice Bhavar Singh Sir, Director General, and Dr. Ravikant Swamy, Director of DME, we would not have been able to come this far. I also thank them for giving us this wonderful opportunity and the resources for conducting the same. I'm thankful to Dr. Ambrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and Festival Director CIFFI, and Dr. Vikrant Kishore, CIFFI Festival Director, along with Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and CIFFI Festival Chief Associate Director for their constant guidance and support and encouragement at every step. I thank our partners for collaborating with us in all our efforts. My gratitude also goes out to the student body of DME Media School Spark, that is students with positive attitude and resonating communication. I want to thank our jury members, Mr. Nimish Kapoor, Mr. Murtaza Ali, Ms. Supriya Suri, and Mr. Pankaj Rakesh for patiently and fairly watching all the movies and for giving their remarks and precious time to this festival. A special note of thanks to Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Ms. Shruti VS, Ms. Mudita Raj, Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Dr. Teenam Bora for their efforts and constant support and cooperation. I thank Dr. Krishna Pandey, Mr. Pramod Pandey, and Mr. Mohammed Kamil for the media coverage, Mr. Sachin Nair, Mr. Sumantra Das, Mr. Yogesh Sharma, and Mr. Vishal Sahai for managing the technical production and digital operations, Mr. Anmol Mehta for designing, and Mr. Abhishek Yadav for the IT support. I would also like to thank the student team of CIFFI who worked tirelessly, facing all the challenges and obstacles of the pandemic and making sure that the work moved smoothly. I must thank all our participants who have contributed their creative pieces to this festival. Lastly, thanks to the audience for joining this session and for being a wonderful and active audience. Thank you so much. The next session for the day is a special session, a film screening of Kannor, Bitter Chestnut, an interaction with director Mr. Gurvinder Singh at 2:30 p.m., followed by a workshop by Mr. Aditya Seth on understanding the female perspective for budding filmmakers at 5:30 p.m. I take your leave now. Thank you for joining us.